My sister Alaya kept telling everyone my husband Alexander was secretly in love with her. She had a meltdown when I proved her wrong. It all started when Alaya kept saying weird stuff about Alexander. Not subtle stuff either. She would literally tell people at family dinners that Alexander was obviously in love with her. The evidence. He helped her move a couch once. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. Also, have you ever dealt with a family member who couldn't tell the difference between kindness and flirting? Me no. I work in landscape architecture. My job is to look at a piece of land, understand its topography, its drainage, its stability, and then build something that lasts. I deal in reality. My sister Alaya deals in angles. She is an influencer, the kind who curates a life that looks golden through a filter but rots the moment you turn off the ring light. We were sitting in the dining room of my parents' house in the historic district of Savannah. The air conditioning was fighting a losing battle against the Georgia humidity, making the air feel heavy and thick, like a wet wool blanket. My parents, Robert and Mary, were at the heads of the table, smiling that tight, polite smile people wear when they're trying to ignore the elephant in the room. Alexander was there, sitting next to me. He is a restoration contractor, the kind of man who can look at a crumbling Victorian molding and see exactly how to bring it back to life. He is quiet, steady, and skilled. And unfortunately for him, he is also kind. Earlier that afternoon, he had finished restoring a vintage vanity for Alaya's studio apartment. It was a favor. A tedious 3-hour favor involving sanding, varnishing, and fixing a broken hinge that required a level of patience I did not possess. Alaya looked at him across the roast chicken. She reached out and touched his forearm, letting her hand linger just a few seconds too long. "Thank you again for the vanity, Alexander," she said, her voice dropping an octave, aiming for sultry but landing on desperate. "You are always building things for me. It feels like you are building our future, doesn't it?" The table went silent. Alexander blinked, pulling his arm back to reach for his water glass. "It is just a hinge, Alaya." It was sticking. "It is never just a hinge with you," she said, winking. I did not say anything. I did not roll my eyes. Instead, I did what I do when I assess a site. I looked at the data. I started running the numbers in my head. This was not the first favor. Last month, Alexander spent a weekend installing reclaimed wood shelves in her kitchen because she wanted a farmhouse chic aesthetic for her vlog. 2 months before that, he fixed the antique plumbing in her bathroom because she claimed the landlord was useless. I did a quick mental audit. Materials for the shelves, $200. Labor for the plumbing at his standard rate, $800. The vanity restoration, $600. Consulting on her balcony garden design, $400. That was just Alexander's contribution. Then there was my side of the ledger. The seed money I had loaned her for her lifestyle brand launch 6 months ago. $4,500. Money she swore she would pay back as soon as her sponsorship deals kicked in. I had not seen a dime. I looked at my parents. My mother was studying her napkin like it contained the secrets of the universe. My father was cutting his chicken with aggressive focus. They heard her. They saw her touching my husband. They saw the delusion dripping off her like sweat in August. And they did nothing. Silence is an endorsement. In my line of work, if you ignore a crack in the foundation, the whole house eventually comes down. Alaya turned to me, smiling that bright, filter-ready smile. "Elena, you don't mind that Alexander spends so much time over at my place, do you? He gets my vision. Not everyone has that artistic eye." She was implying I was boring, pragmatic. That Alexander, the artist, was starved for a muse and she was it. "I don't mind him helping family," I said, my voice flat. "But labor isn't free, Alaya. Even family rates have a cap." "Oh, stop being such an accountant," she laughed, waving a hand. "Alexander doesn't do it for the money. He does it for the love." She looked at him again, eyes wide and glistening. "Right." Alexander looked uncomfortable, shifting in his chair. "I do it because Elena asks me to help you, Alaya." "Ma'am," she hummed, not listening, rewriting his words in real time to fit the script in her head. "Because of Elena." "Sure." I looked at the three of them. My husband looking trapped. My sister living in a fantasy world funded by my bank account. My parents enabling it with their cowardice. I wasn't sad. I wasn't jealous. I was just done paying the bill. The drive home from my parents' house was quiet. Not the comfortable silence of a long married couple, but the heavy, pressurized silence of a structure bearing too much weight. Alexander kept his eyes on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I waited until we were inside our own kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound, before I opened the ledger. "I am closing the account, Alexander," I said. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. No more favors. No more fixes. No more late-night consultations about her aesthetic. Alexander let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for 3 hours. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Elena, she is your sister." "I was just trying to be." "You were being kind," I interrupted. "But kindness is a currency, and Alaya is counterfeiting it. She takes your labor and she turns it into love in her head. We are stopping the supply." "I don't want to be a jerk," he said, looking down at his boots. "You aren't being a jerk. You are setting a boundary. If she needs a contractor, she can hire one. If she needs a boyfriend, she can find one. You are neither." He looked up at me, and I saw the relief wash over him. It was tangible. He did not want to be her handyman. He just didn't know how to say no to family without permission. "Okay," he said. "You are right. Hard stop." The test came less than 24 hours later. We were eating dinner when Alexander's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, then at me. "It is her." "Read it," I said. "She says she bought a vintage ceiling fan for her vlog backdrop. She needs it installed by tomorrow morning for a shoot." She put a heart emoji. "Tell her no," I said. "Don't apologize. Just say you are booked." He typed it out. "Can't do it. I'm fully booked this week. Send." We waited. 10 seconds later my phone lit up. Then his again. And mine. She was calling. We let it go to voicemail. I thought she would explode. I expected a screaming text, a tantrum. But Alaya didn't operate with direct confrontation. She operated in the shadows of perception. An hour later my friend Sarah texted me a screenshot. "Hey, are you guys okay? Alaya just posted this on her close friend's story." I opened the image. It was a black and white photo of Alexander's tool belt, which he had left at her place the day before. The lighting was moody, intimate. The caption read, "He tries so hard to fix things, but some people just want to control every breath he takes. I wish I could save him from the abuse. He deserves to be free." My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a complaint. It was a narrative. She wasn't just claiming he loved her. She was claiming I was his abuser. She was rewriting the reality of my marriage to fit the tragedy she wanted to star in. She was painting me as the villain who kept the prince in a tower, and herself as the savior waiting in the wings. It was a whisper campaign. A toxic drip of poison into the ears of our mutual friends, disguised as concern. I didn't cry. I didn't call her. I saved the screenshot to a folder on my laptop labeled Evidence. This wasn't a family spat anymore. This was character assassination. 2 days later the summons came. My mother, Mary, called me at work. Her voice was tight, pitched high with that specific frequency of anxiety she reserved for Alaya's episodes. "We need to have dinner," she said. "Tonight. Just family. Please, Elena." Just family meant an ambush. When Alexander and I walked into my parents' living room, the air was suffocating. My father, Robert, was pacing. My mother was wringing her hands on the sofa. Alaya wasn't there. "She is devastated," my mother started before we even sat down. "She called us crying. She said Alexander is refusing to help her because you forbade it. She said you are isolating him." "I am setting boundaries," I said, my voice steady. "And Alexander is an adult. He decided he didn't want to install a ceiling fan. That isn't isolation, Mom. That is scheduling." "You don't understand," my father said, stopping his pacing to look at me. He looked old, tired. "She is fragile right now. She feels abandoned. If you cut her off like this, she spirals. You know how she gets. So your solution is to feed the delusion." "Yes. To let her believe my husband is her boyfriend just to keep her calm. We just need to keep the peace," my mother pleaded, reaching for my hand. "Just for a little while longer. Just until she gets settled. Please, Elena. Be the bigger person. You are so strong. She needs this." I looked at them and suddenly, the architecture of my family became crystal clear. I realized then that keeping the peace is a trap. It is a beautiful phrase for a dirty reality. My parents weren't asking for peace. They were asking for silence. They were hostages to Alaya's volatility. Every time she screamed, every time she threatened to spiral, they paid the ransom. They paid it with their dignity, with their money, and now they wanted to pay it with my marriage. They weren't protecting her because they loved her. They were enabling her because they were terrified of her. I am not the foundation for her stability, I said, pulling my hand away. And neither is Alexander. We are not paying the ransom anymore. She is your sister, my mother cried. And he is my husband, I said, standing up. If you want to live in her fantasy world to stay safe, that is your choice. But do not expect us to visit. We walked out. The silence in the car this time wasn't heavy. It was the silence of a demolition site after the charges have gone off. The dust was settling, and the view was finally clear. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I went into research mode. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. My parents called it fragile. Alaya called it true love. I needed to know what the professionals called it. I spent hours reading journals, case studies, and psychological breakdowns. And then I found it. Erotomania. It wasn't just a word. It was a blueprint of my sister's mind. A delusional disorder where the affected person believes that another person, usually of higher status, is in love with them. I read the symptoms, and it was like reading a biography of the last 6 months. Interpretation of benign signals as secret messages. The hinge repair was building a future. The belief that the object of affection is being kept away by a controlling third party. Her Instagram post about me being an abuser. Persistent pursuit despite rejection. It wasn't just jealousy. It wasn't just being a pick-me girl. It was a pathology. In her mind, Alexander wasn't rejecting her. He was sending her coded signals of distress that only she could decode. Every no from him was interpreted as a help me in her twisted reality. This changed everything. You cannot reason with a delusion. You cannot boundary your way out of a clinical detachment from reality. I needed to know how far this went. If this was a pattern, there had to be a history. Alaya had lived in Atlanta for 3 years during college before moving back to Savannah. We rarely spoke about that time. She said she came back because the city was too toxic. I opened a new tab. I pulled up a background check service. I typed in her name. I paid the $40 fee. I watched the loading bar spin, feeling like I was prying up the floorboards of a house I knew was infested. The report generated. Traffic tickets, past addresses. And then, under the civil judgments and liens section, a red flag. A restraining order. Filed 3 years ago in Fulton County. The petitioner wasn't an ex-boyfriend. It was a 60-year-old literature professor. I downloaded the PDF. The details were nauseating. Hundreds of emails. Showing up at his home. Interpreting his lectures on Romeo and Juliet as personal messages to her. And at the bottom, the record showed the case was sealed and settled. The legal fees were astronomical. Paid by a familiar LLC. R&M Holdings. My parents knew. They knew she had stalked a man before. They knew she was dangerous. They had paid thousands of dollars to bury the evidence, to scrub her record, to bring her home and unleash her on me. They weren't just cowards. They were accomplices. I printed the documents. The printer rhythmically spitting out the pages sounded like a gavel banging down. The Savannah Garden Party is the social apex of the year. It is held in the squares, surrounded by live oaks and Spanish moss. It is the one night where the facade of Southern gentility is polished to a mirror shine. Everyone who matters is there. My parents were there, of course, holding court near the fountain, pretending their family wasn't fracturing. Alexander and I arrived late. I was wearing a structured navy dress. Alexander was in a suit. We weren't there to socialize. We were there to end it. We saw her before she saw us. Alaya was standing near the bandstand. She was wearing a white dress. Not a cocktail dress. It was floor-length lace with a subtle train. It was a wedding dress. She looked manic, her eyes darting around the crowd, glittering with a feverish intensity. She spotted Alexander. Her face transformed into a look of beatific rapture. She grabbed a champagne glass and tapped it with a fork. The sharp ting-ting-ting cut through the chatter. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice trembling with emotion. "Everyone, if I could have a moment. I have a special announcement. True love. It takes a winding path. But tonight, I think we are finally ready to stop hiding." The crowd hushed. My parents looked frozen, their faces draining of blood. They knew. They saw the dress. They saw the look in her eye. And they were paralyzed. Alaya turned toward Alexander, extending a hand. Alexander! I didn't scream. I didn't cause a scene. Simply walked. I crossed the grass with the efficiency of a project manager walking a site. I stepped between Alaya and my husband. I didn't look at her. I looked at my parents. I walked right up to Robert and Mary. They looked at me with pleading eyes, begging me silently to play along, to cover it up, to fix the leak. I handed my father the manila folder. It was heavy with the weight of the Atlanta court documents. I know about the professor, I said. My voice was low, lethal, audible only to them and the people standing in our immediate circle. I know about the restraining order. I know you paid to bury it. My mother gasped a wet, choking sound. I will not let Alexander be the next victim you pay to silence, I continued. Get her help, or I will release this to every person in this square. I turned to Alexander. We are leaving. He took my hand. We turned our backs on them. Behind us, I heard Alaya's voice falter. Alexander. Wait. Where are you going? I heard my father's voice, sharp and panicked, finally intervening. Alaya, stop. It is over. We walked out of the square, the gravel crunching under our feet, leaving the ruins of their reputation behind us. Autumn in Savannah brings a break in the humidity. The air turns crisp, the light turns golden. It is the season for harvesting and for preparing for winter. Alexander and I are renovating our own kitchen now. He is sanding the cabinets. I am designing the layout. We work in a comfortable rhythm. The only sounds the sander and the radio. My phone is silent. I blocked my parents, Alaya, and every flying monkey they tried to send my way 3 months ago. I heard through the grapevine that the garden party incident was the end of their social standing. The rumors were too loud to suppress. Alaya was sent to an inpatient facility in North Carolina. My parents sold the house in the historic district and moved to the coast, running from the shame. I put down my pencil and looked at Alexander. He paused the sander, looking up at me with sawdust in his hair. He smiled. It was a real smile, unburdened by the weight of someone else's fantasy. I realized then that in Alaya's story, I would always be the villain. I was the wicked sister who stole her prince, the cruel warden who kept them apart. And I made peace with that. There is a quiet power in being the villain in someone else's delusion. Means you are the one living in reality. Means you are the one who survived. If you have ever had to be the villain to save your own sanity, to protect the people you love from a toxicity that calls itself family, share this story. You aren't crazy. You aren't cruel. And you aren't alone.